Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast. I'm Anthony L. Wolf, your loyal Indie Diarist, content manager, gamer, everything that you guys already know. And today with me are actually two very special guests, and I believe this is the first time I'm hosting two people at once for the podcast. So, without further ado, I'll just let them introduce themselves.
Cool. Hey, Auntie. My name's Dom. I'm the co-founder and programmer at Spiral Circus. I used to be in research science, so I used to be like a biological physicist, and that's where I kind of learned to code, and I did a lot of software development in that role. But I was kind of over that after a few years, and I really wanted to make games, but I suck at art, and I didn't have anyone to like do art for my game, so I was kind of making little hobby projects or whatever, but it was only when I met Tom and kind of cornered him and begged him to make a game with me that I felt like it was time to, quit the day job and do this full time. So when I met Tom, we started the company and we've gone from there.
Yeah.
So physicist, you say? Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
I'm Tom. I'm the art director for Spiral Circus and co-founder. And I originally was a fine artist and illustrator, working in Bristol, just doing like gallery shows and commissions and kind of just drawing my own stuff for a living. And I very fortuitously met Dom through our girlfriends at a party. And yeah, like Dom said, he cornered me and said that he wanted to make a game. And at that time, I really wanted to get to a stage where my static characters that I was drawing, I wanted to get them animated. And that was my kind of main focus, was to kind of give them a world. So it was perfect timing. And from there, we just kind of jumped into what became SILT, which is our first game.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's an interesting story, actually, and kind of answers one of the questions that I had for later on, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I guess things happen for a reason. If you guys met at the perfect time, it sounds like. But yeah, let's start with a little icebreaker. So, apart from SILT, of course, what's one game you think everyone should play? And we can go for with one each, I suppose.
Sure. Personally, I would say Darkwood. I think that's...
Oh, I love Darkwood,
It's one of the best games I've played recently. And I've never really played top-down horror like that before. So yeah, I would highly recommend that. Really, really good.
Okay. And Dom?
I think if I stayed close to the genre that Silt said, I'd say play Subnautica. I love Subnautica.
Oh.
But if I was able to sort of step away from anything that's like what we do, I would say play Disco Elysium, because that's my favorite game.
That's true, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm about to play Disco Elysium. It's on my list. It's probably the next game I'm going to play, because I know that it's a beloved one, very dearly beloved one. Well, as I may have mentioned in our conversations, the Indie Diarist is a podcast about the human stories behind game development, and so I'm curious about your personal stories. And I guess we can start with very early on. So what games do you remember playing growing up? What were your favorites? And do you think they had an influence on your work, on your game design work in these years?
I would definitely say that the games that I played when I was younger almost directly influenced what we especially what we made with SILT and probably future stuff, because I kind of had a bit of a hiatus, like, I don't know if you'd call it that, because it was about 20 years. I literally was obsessed with games up until I was probably about 16, no, a bit younger than that. And I gave up because I was playing all the time and I really wanted to focus on my art more. So I purposely stopped playing games for a bit, and then didn't really play them again until we started the company, really, like maybe a year or so before. So I went from N64 days to the next game I played after that era was Limbo, which is quite a jump in quality. And really, when I played that, I kind of suddenly realized that the way that I drew and what I drew was kind of applicable to the games world. So it kind of basically changed my whole way of thinking about how I was going to use my art. So yeah, it's really, really kind of groundbreaking.
I love Limbo.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was such a great moment in just for indie games in general, but in gaming, just the atmosphere, the aesthetic, and yeah, I can see a lot of that in SILT definitely. What about you, Dom? What do you remember playing growing up?
I think I've always been a huge video game player, and I think I started with maybe a SNES, and having a go on like some older family members' Mega Drive when I was a kid. And then I had like Nintendo consoles, so I had the SNES and then the N64. So I used to just play Nintendo games all the time. So GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and all of the kind of rare games, like Banjo and those big 3D adventure platformers that were popular on the N64 times. And then kind of didn't have a console for a while, went onto PC games, played a lot of strategy and simulation and stuff. I basically play any kind of game, really. I've always just really thought games as a medium are just super, super interesting as well. But right up until I started the PhD work, I hadn't touched any computer programming or anything. So I just thought that they were completely magic. Had no idea how one would go about making a video game. Just thought it was some kind of, arcane art that I wouldn't ever know anything about. And then my PhD kind of forced me to learn to program. And once you start like putting a few instructions into a computer and getting it to do stuff that you want it to do, games suddenly feel like slightly more within reach. So then I started obsessing about like learning Unity and that kind of stuff from all the publicly available tutorials and whatnot, and just really wanted to make a game after that. I didn't really care what game.
Yeah, well, I'd say SILT turned out to be great, but it's interesting that you say that, because I guess you mentioned magic, games being magic, but you can see the magic once you start putting commands or giving a computer some orders, and then you see them executed on screen. Then you see that magic coming to life. And it's something that I experimented with myself, because I did dabble with programming and something like that in recent years. I just never did like a full game with assets and whatnot, just a text-based adventure. But it's still incredibly great to give the computer some commands, and it's like a creative art, I suppose. Programming.
It's just really satisfying. Yeah, you just if the computer doesn't quite do what you want it to do already, you can just make it do something.
Exactly,
and I think just because my experience of computers before that was all on the kind of user side, where you're not really seeing any kind of code, you're just seeing the finished software. I guess I just didn't really have any understanding of what was underneath it all. As soon as I think I'm everything I get into, I want to learn how to make, right?
Yeah.
That's just always an instinct for me. So getting into music as a kid immediately made me want to be in bands and like make my version of whatever it was that I liked. And I guess it's kind of been the same with music and, cooking and anything like that. I just get really nerdy about something, and then I want to know everything about it. And then
I'm exactly the same. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So the magic kind of it just gets better when you know how it's made, because it's really complicated and difficult, and the people that do it are really it's really cool that they managed to do that stuff. And I think that about basically everything that I like, especially things like music and film and whatever else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm exactly the same. And I think your story is particularly inspiring. It can be particularly inspiring to people who are just maybe starting out with game development, because it doesn't matter at what age you start. You said you started programming games after your PhD, so well over your 20s, I suppose.
Late 20s,
late 20s and something like that. So and you made SILT, which, if you haven't tried out SILT, listeners, whoever's listening to this episode, just give it a chance, because it's just an amazing game. But we'll get onto SILT in a second. I'm curious about the next step in your journey. Like, when did you both realize you wanted to be a game dev? Like that jump between the PhD and game development, what made you realize that it was something that you really wanted to do? At least for you, Dom, but for you, Tom, it was meeting Dom, I suppose.
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, I just think that like it was. I guess I wasn't really thinking of it as a game initially. Like for me, it was just so exciting to see my characters animated, and because at the time we weren't even living in the same city, the majority of the time I wouldn't even be like moving the character myself. So I was watching this as if it was an animated clip or whatever. And then there was another level when I started testing SILT, and I'd play my own characters, and it was just the most mind-boggling thing for me to be like, wow, like it just blew my mind to think that like, that's what we do now. And yeah, it's just very inspiring. So yeah, I never really thought of it as going down a traditional game dev route, I guess, for me at least.
Yeah, I think I definitely wanted to be a game developer as soon as I realized that, it was maybe possible to learn to program in Unity. It just, I don't know, I just immediately thought this would be the coolest thing to do, and it became the only thing I wanted to do after that. And I gradually got like more and more fed up with the day job because it wasn't that, I guess I was just desperate to find the kind of gaps in my skill set that would actually allow me to do it, because obviously I'm a programmer but not an artist at all, not a sound person, not an animator, and you need all of those things. There are developers out there that do everything themselves and they're good at everything themselves, and that's amazing, but that wasn't true for me. And I really needed to find like the other members of the band, if you know what I mean, right? Like I needed somebody to do this part of it, somebody to play bass, play drums or whatever. The video game version of that is I needed like, a lead singer or something, like Tom being the artist that makes it look cool. And then we needed other people as well. And as soon as I met Tom, it was like, well, let's put it together. Let's do it.
Oh yeah, that's great. And what about the name Spiral Circus Games? I'm really curious. Where does that come from?
Name wise, that came from a character that I think I'd drawn fairly recently. It was a character called the Spiral King. I was just going through a spiral phase, really.
The spiral phase, love it. And this, fellows, is where everything went wrong at once. I had like audio issues. The guys couldn't hear me anymore. Everything exploded. Well, not physically exploded, but like in a way, in a metaphorical way. So we decided to postpone. And this is everything that I managed to capture from part 1. And to be fair, nothing got lost. So I'm very happy about that. And then we resumed with part 2 a couple weeks later. And here comes part 2. My recording again. And actually, we should be done in about 15 minutes, I think. So we should be okay.
Right. You don't need to rush it, and you shouldn't underestimate how long we can babble on for as
well. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I'll probably keep this first bit. I will say during the episode that we had some issues the first time around, and then yeah, this could go in some sort of bloopers halfway through. But anyway, right. So, let's start over from, well, not start over, but let's start from the question that I was about to ask you last time before we had all those issues. So it was about SILT and the fact that, to me, I feel like it is a little hidden gem. So I love the aesthetics, the general direction, all the photography, and the heavy surrealism behind it. So what inspired you guys to work on SILT? And I think I know already the answer, because I remember the Spiral period of Tom. So yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Tom, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was just gonna. You can go on about it afterwards, but I was gonna say. So when we first met and we decided to make a game together, the next thing we did, like a week or two later, was go meet each other in a pub, and we sat with essentially looking through like Tom's most recent artwork and talking about the kinds of things. I guess I was looking for something that we could hit on that was like we can build the game out of that. And one of the first things he showed me was a series that he'd been working on of just sort of watercolor paintings of characters drowning in these really spooky, dark, oceanic voids, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that could be something. So yeah, we went from there.
I was going through a stage where I wanted to I was painting more of my fears. Like I for years I was painting my. This is a bit of an elaborate story, but for years I was painting my fear of like people wearing animal suits. That was like my main thing for years, was like me trying to get over that fear.
I don't know
And
if that fear has a name.
yeah, I don't think it does actually. Yeah, no, you're right. Just fear of anthropomorphism, basically. But like after doing that, why I realized I wanted to paint my other fear, which is the fear of deep underwater spaces.
Oh wow, yeah.
So that's the series that I was doing at the time, like just for my own kind of pleasure, really. And that's the time that I met Dom. So it all kind of slotted into place quite nicely.
Yeah, I think I'd been playing quite a lot of Subnautica at the time as well, and saw that and just thought, oh, cool, underwater game. So the game itself, like when we first met, we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know how to make games really. I'd only made little hobby projects. And so we were sort of trying to come up with an idea that didn't have much scope, that was just going to be really, really simple. And we just thought we would make a character that sort of swam down and down and down, almost like a little mobile game or something, right?
Oh yeah,
and
right.
then as soon as we
like
started drawing
endless
things,
runner or a scroller, yeah, something like that.
yeah, exactly, just swimming to the bottom of the
Right.
lake, maybe collecting things or whatever. But it just sort of exploded in scope as soon as Tom started drawing things for it.
as it happens, I suppose. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I have this tendency for I'm just really bad at doing anything that's simple. Like I definitely just like the minute I start something, it gets bigger and bigger and more kind of epic, and that's exactly what happened with this project. So yeah, it kind of went out of our hands. Really became a big project instead of a small quick.
It's fascinating what it became, really, because it's like this huge underwater. That feels like there's some kind of universe, and that's what you were talking about too last time. The fact that you wanted to create a game or a world around your art. And I think that's really interesting, and that's it really comes through in SILT because it feels like there's a world, and that's sort of what I want to touch on next. So like the iconography in SILT is interesting. Like you have all those animals, statues, and all of that. And of course, if you want to read into them, I suppose there's like some kind of hidden lore, ancient civilizations, and whatnot. Do you have any more insights on that?
I definitely do have like a kind of underlying lore in a lot of my drawings, but I haven't really developed it that much. So it's more kind of just I guess like yeah, there's a symbol that I use in a lot of my drawings that I've been linking with a lot of my characters, and yeah, I mean I think for the future I definitely want to like build on the lore side of it more and kind of expand that world. At the moment, it's just like a purely visual and aesthetic thing.
It's fine. I think there's a lot of potential there because like it feels like the machine where you get into in SILT, and not to spoil anything to anybody who may not have played it, but it feels like it comes from somewhere else, or it feels like there was like whole religion or ancient civilization in there, and then you just but cool stuff.
Yeah. So it's interesting how like the expansion into the different media like makes you think about these things in different ways, because I think Tom was always doing world building with paintings, but paintings don't have a lot of responsibility like to explain themselves to you, right? They can sit there and they can imply everything they want to imply, but they don't really have to spell anything out. And then our first game, we didn't have a writer, and we were looking to try and make a game that didn't need localizing or voice acting or anything like that, because we were really, really small. So we wanted to keep things like localization costs really down. So all of those reasons meant that we weren't going to do anything particularly spelled out. But obviously, since we're asking a player to spend a few hours inside our world, it's much more so than a painting would be. And I think that's something we want to keep doing, with our future games, is keep building in more and more, like actually getting more and more explicit with this world building. So we were very deliberate in SILT to keep it really, really vague, and to try to do all the storytelling by just having stuff in the background in the world, right? And let the player think about things. And I think we will always have that sort of sensibility, just because that's, you know, we like that kind of fiction. We really like sort of, we both bonded over like being big fans of David Lynch movies.
Oh
when we
wow!
first met.
Okay.
And,
So
you
then,
know,
okay. I see. Yeah, big fan of David Lynch myself. Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
do
and something Lynch refuses to do is explicitly explain like exactly what anything means. And I think it's, you know, it's an interesting like guideline to set for yourself, to try not to just sort of spell it out really, really explicitly. And then the really nice upshot of that is when SILT came out, we got this awesome video show up on YouTube a couple of weeks later from a YouTuber called Super Horror Bro that does like lore deep dives.
Oh yeah, because then you do get those from the community. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and then that video is really nicely made, and they spent all this time like zooming in to the background details and things like that, and just that was like the nicest feeling of the whole development process, was seeing that somebody cared enough about this to like look closely at it. And it, you know, and I think the game supported that, right? Like there was enough detail to go looking for, to make a little video out of, and really think about all of the implications of it.
Yeah,
and yeah, we get to, once it's out there, it sort of lives in other people's minds.
Exactly,
before you lose a little bit of control over it.
Yeah,
also,
I suppose they make you realize also things that maybe you hadn't even considered yourself, because maybe they inspired you for even more pieces of lore, Tom, for example, in your paintings.
They definitely did. I mean, it was really nice to kind of hand it off in a way, and see different people's interpretations. Some of them were right, some of them were completely like different, and things that I hadn't thought of before. So
we had some really fun long form messages on Twitter, just like unsolicited fan theories about what they thought it was, and I love reading them.
Yeah,
it's so interesting to like. It's such a nice feeling. My whole life I've always dreamed of making something that was out in the world and that people gave enough of a crap about to talk about.
Yeah, it must be the most amazing feeling. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, David Lynch, there was all that quiet storytelling or silent storytelling and whatnot that you know, in the David Lynch's movies, but also now it's coming more to the fore because of From Software and what they did with Dark Souls. They made it even more mainstream than it was. So yeah, there's a whole community of people online just diving into the games that don't exactly tell you everything you need to know. And so I suppose it's the most exciting feeling for you guys. But yeah, so these two questions were for Tom mostly, I suppose, because of the artsy bit, art style and whatnot. Something very technical for you, Dom. What's the most annoying bug you fixed in SILT? Any funny stories about that?
Yeah. So there was a couple that, like, you know, when you put a game through QA, they do a process called destructive testing. And that's when they play like the most obnoxious, you know, user possible, where they just try everything they possibly can to break it. And, you know, getting bug report tickets for like, if I mash all of the buttons while pressing in and out just as the scene loads, and I jump through the exit of the scene just as the scene, while mashing all of the buttons, it can set the game into this weird like locked state where none of the, you know, you just get stuck there. And what I wanted to say, well, just don't do that then. Like, please, just don't. Nobody's going to do that. But
maybe speedrunners, you know, that's a speedrunner trick mostly.
Yeah. And reproducing things like that is quite difficult, right? You're sitting there just trying to trigger all the same things that they triggered. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So you spend a lot of time chasing stuff like that. But the ones that really annoy me are the ones that are still in the game now, that were just so rare that we couldn't ever patch them. And I've seen them, you know, I don't think any of them break the game, which is fine. But I've seen things like watching a YouTuber play through, and they're swimming up in the beautiful final credits scene, and, you know, the scene that we spent ages trying to make look a certain way and have a certain feeling, and then they're just like a little jellyfish from a previous level wanders into the scene and tries to blow them up, and it's just like a jellyfish that hadn't properly disappeared when the scene had changed or something. You know? Like, you just think, oh damn, missed that one.
Yeah. Imagine that. Imagine floating towards the surface and whatnot, and then a jellyfish comes in and just kills the entire.
Well, yeah. They were really scared that they were about to die, right?
Yeah, you sit there wondering, is this what was supposed to happen? Like, are they all supposed to die now?
Yeah. Well, in that case, the jellyfish just narrowly missed the
Oh, right,
streamer
okay.
because they're not in control of the character in that point, right? It's a cutscene, and the jellyfish sort of just swept past it. And I still don't know what would have happened if that jellyfish had killed them, if they'd have died in that state. What would have happened to the whole credit sequence?
Yeah.
Like, would it have just done something really, really weird? But yeah, it's those little jellyfish. I thought I fixed them like dozens of times, but they eluded me. They didn't clean themselves up properly.
Right. So, well, moving on, and if there's one thing you wish every player would get or feel while playing SILT, what would it be?
My immediate answer to that is a sense of like dread and foreboding and mystery and probably confusion are the main things that I'd be happy with.
Yeah, I'd echo that too.
Yeah.
It's all. I think the thing we'll always try to do, the thing where we feel like we're really in our lane is producing these kind of like creepy, fucked vibes. You know, just things being sort of unsettling, not quite right. You know, but while also being beautiful and kind of quite nice to look at a lot of the time. It's this lovely balance I think Tom's always done with his still art as well, is just striking a balance between kind of scary and almost horror, but it's not quite horror. There's a levity to it that pure horror doesn't have.
I've always had like quite a dark sense of humor, and that's definitely the thing that I want to keep pushing with our games, because it's just how I think mainly, and I think my characters are kind of projections of that. So yeah, that's definitely another thing that I'd hope people will enjoy.
Yeah, it's the David Lynch influence again, right? Where like his films are scary, but they're not horror films, and the fear comes out of being in the wrong.
That's true. Yeah,
I don't know. The fear comes from like feeling unsettled, feeling like you don't quite belong, or feeling like there are forces around you that you don't quite understand, and things like that. And that's always the vibes. I know. I feel like that's the thing I'm always trying to like emphasize in the game.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I think it does come through with the game and all that sense of dark foreboding. Because and the atmosphere and all of that. It's
because the game doesn't really come at you that hard. You know, it's not a hard game to play. There's a couple of moments where you're out of your depth and you have to get away from creatures that will definitely hurt you and things like that. But they're all just animals. They're not sinister. They're not plotting against you. They haven't got any kind of evil intent. They're just animals, and you're sort of swimming next to them, and some of them might grab you if they see you or whatever. And I think that was what SILT was all about, right? Is like you're out of your element. You're in the world that these things inhabit, and you don't really belong there, and you don't really have any kind of special skills or anything to help you. You know, you're not stronger than them. You can't kill them. You can't really do any of these things. The only thing you can do is try to manipulate them with your possession power.
Yeah.
And I think
you don't even grow your skills as you go on, so it's just you all throughout.
Yeah, exactly. So it's lonely, and it's not clear that you're, it's not a power fantasy. It's not like you're going to get really, really strong and you're going to be able to defeat all of these things. And I think that's. I'm hoping that people that like those kinds of worlds, those kinds of David Lynch vibes, that sort of abstract horror, would like SILT a lot.
I suppose it's a Jurassic Park effect, as I like to call it, because when I was little, I watched Jurassic Park so much, but at some point I wondered, but those dinosaurs are just animals. They just want to feed. They're not evil. We just see them as evil because they're trying to eat the protagonist, but they're living their life essentially, and they're following their instincts. I was like 7 years old when I came up with this. So
and it's a story about human like hubris, isn't it? It's a story about trying to be too in control of nature, and nature kind of biting back, and that's always a theme with us for sure.
Yeah. So in line with this kind of dark mood that we've set for this last question, what do you guys love and hate about being game developers?
Good question. I I love the team side of it because I was working on my own for so many years that it's just an incredible feeling to have people expanding on what I'm drawing and turning it more into a world. I absolutely love that side of it. Because yeah, being working on my own for 10 years plus definitely grates on you a little bit. And hate, what do I hate about games development? I think it's very like everything's very complicated. Like it would be nice if there was like a way of making it a little bit like easier to access some aspects of it. But that said, it's challenging, and challenges are always a good thing. So, you know,
well, you came from a background where you never really had to deal with the kind of restrictions that making a video game put on you, all the technical stuff. You used to just be able to go on what you thought looked right, and that was the end of it. And now I have to tell you it has to be this size and this resolution, and it has to have this many layers, and it has to, you know, and it can't have
tentacles.
Yeah, we spent an awful lot of time on development of SILT with Tom drawing things that had dozens of tentacles in them, and me having to negotiate down the number of tentacles because we just can't have that many.
Yeah.
And then you'd agree on a number, and then it would come back like a few weeks later with the asset slightly updated, and there's like 2 more tentacles back in it. And again, we have to have a talk. Like, where did these tentacles come from?
Yeah, where do these tentacles come from? Yeah.
No, I said you could have 6.
Well,
sea creatures need tentacles.
Yeah,
Difficult compromise.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the matter of having to fit into some sort of scope or something like that, and then you do have your creative freedom, but there's always limitations from the project, I suppose. So, yeah, what you can and cannot do.
That's really good for me though, because I definitely like feel that
Oh yeah, you can get sidetracked or carried away, and you just do it.
Exactly. I mean, it's nice to have deadlines and be able to like, you know, have a point where you have to stop. Otherwise, I could be tinkering on these things for years. So
you'd never release anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think my answer to that question would be like, what I love about it is basically everything. It's exactly the kind of thing I want to do. It's what I would do if I didn't have to worry about money or anything like that. I would do it for fun. I think so. That's everything I love about it. Is everything I have to do to make a game. It's the most interesting thing I think I could find for me to do. But the thing I hate about it is that to do it professionally, you have to do it between 2 and 3 or 4 times as fast as is comfortable for you to do. So you know what I mean? So like, I love doing it, but then I don't want to have to do it 70, 80-hour weeks and things like that, right? Because that does grate on you. And, you know, it's on us to try to figure out how best to schedule time and things like that. We certainly don't put our contractors through those kinds of hours. But, you know, me and Tom as founders, you know, it's fallen on us to do a lot of really long weeks. And it's difficult. Like, you know, perhaps that was our fault for a little bit of naivety on our first game when we made our schedules and things like that. We didn't really know what it was going to take to make a game. We had a lot of great support from our publisher and they helped us a lot. But there are situations where you have to work like crazy, and it would be nice to have a little bit less of that and a little bit more creative time, you know?
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. And it kind of answers my next question, which is what drags you down? Like, what's the biggest challenge that you guys face as indie devs, and how do you cope with that? I mean, I suppose time management and that's part of the picture, isn't it? But
yeah, and just the pressure. It's like, that's the hardest thing about it. You're just under so much pressure to deliver all the time. You know, we agreed to this big thing that we're going to do. We didn't really know whether we were going to be able to do it at the beginning, and you somehow pull it off at the end. But you're sort of constantly putting out fires, and you're constantly stressed out. And you know, a lot of the process of development is a certain amount of panic creeping around in the back of your head as you get your stuff done. And yeah, I think maybe as we get better at doing this, hopefully we get better at scheduling, we get better at understanding like how long it takes to do stuff and building in kind of extra time and extra resources and stuff. But we made SILT on a pretty slim budget, and we kind of agreed to the time frame. You know, 2.5 years before the game came out, we basically agreed on when it was going to come out, and we had to hit all those milestones. And Yeah, there was parts of it that were super, super high pressure, super difficult. But maybe that's just how everything works, isn't it?
Well, this kind of feeds well into my next question, which is one of the last ones I had for you guys. If you had unlimited budget and time, then what game would you create?
I think we just do a way bigger version of the sort of things we do already, though, right? It would just be a case of being able to have every wild idea that came into your head. Like, if you had a team of animators you could throw into these things. If you had, if we had like multiple of all the different roles instead of one of all the different roles, I think we really could just let a lot of our ideas come out more fully formed. As it is, we're constantly scoping down and trying to make it more realistic and things like that. So yeah, if we had unlimited budget, we just have a bigger team and we'd just be able to do these things without, we'd have help, and that would be lovely.
It is definitely the big dream, like to have like a big creative team and be able to like not think about like having to scale the ideas down because of budget reasons or time reasons, and just go wild with it. I'd absolutely love that. But I feel that this is our first game, and that hopefully will come at some point in the future. So
I'm a little more nervous about scaling up than Tom is. I think I would be a little freaked out if the company got really big. It turns into just operating it turns into its own task, its own several full-time jobs, and it is quite nice now because we have, for example, like we brought in Nick to do audio on SILT, and he got to do all of the audio on SILT, so all of the composing, all of the sound design and everything like that, and the implementation of it in the game. And it meant that he really got to like put his artistic stamp on it in a really clear way. And I do kind of like the way that works, where you have like a sort of head there that's really in charge. But there are just certain tasks that just take insane amounts of time that are quite, dull and repetitive. Like just producing, variations on art, or just doing kind of dull game dev stuff. And when you're doing all of those things, it's really hard to be free and creative on your, and follow up your ideas. So it's nice to have support with all of that kind of stuff. If you just had a couple more people to share the load, I think I'd be really happy. I think Tom would happily have like a 100-person studio with like 60 artists.
I would love that, but not from a management perspective.
That sounds like it could become a nightmare very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. But I would love the idea of having like a whole room full of artists to go back and forward with ideas. That would be amazing. But I mean, I say that now. I've never done that, so I might absolutely hate that if that ever does happen. Who knows? Only time will tell.
In the tiny team like we are, it is just like it feels like we've all got too many tasks all the time. So it's it would probably be nice to have a little bit more slack with that. And I think on our next game we'll be looking to scale up a little bit more from where we were on SILT.
Right. Well, funny you mentioned your next game, because it's time for some parting words and a wrap up. So are you working on your next project right now? And I think you are. Can you give me a hint on what it is, and anything really?
It is definitely a game.
Okay, we'll close it there. Okay, right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, I think people that like SILT will like it, but it'll have a bunch more stuff in it that SILT didn't have. I think that's as that's as specific as I can get right now.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. I think that's good enough. Yeah. So, as a last question from me, where can other people find you, and if they do, how can they support you?
Game Circus on Twitter is our main social media platform, and if people have run away from Twitter, then Instagram, Spiral Circus Games. The easiest way actually is to go to our website, which is spiralcircusgames.com, and every social media link is at the bottom there, and choose whichever one you prefer, really.
And if you want to take a punt on trying out SILT on whatever platform you have, it's out on PC and all consoles. It's pretty cheap. It's quite a short game. It's the kind of thing where you can play in an afternoon or two if you want something different to get into. So if you like the sound of what we've talked about, then take a chance on it maybe.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dom and Tom, for your time and for putting up with me and all my technical issues. I will definitely find a solution for future episodes. But yeah, it's been great having you on the show, and I think this is probably going to be one of the best episodes so far. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And that, my friends, is a wrap on this beautiful episode of the Indie Diarist podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to Tom and Dom for dedicating so much time to me and my podcasts, and to discuss their stories and the way they met and everything about SILT, their beautiful little game, which I have played through and through, beginning to end. And I can confirm it's a beautiful little gem. As fascinating and amazing as we've described it over the course of this episode. So do check it out. I will leave a link to find it on Steam in the description of this episode. So, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show because there's a lot of exciting stuff coming, a lot of more episodes in the pipeline, and tell your friends, maybe on social media if you've enjoyed it. Spread the word, as they say. Or just let me know, because you can find me on Twitter at the Indie Diarist. That's the handle, and that's the only way that you can support the show right now. More ways will come in the future, as I always say, probably towards summer. But yeah, for now, that's the only thing you can do. And lastly, if you are an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch because I would love to hear from you. I'm always looking for new guests to feature on the show, especially if you guys have a beautiful story to tell, just like Tom and Dom did over here. And I would be delighted to feature you on the show for my listeners. So, until next time, guys, speak to you on the next episode of the Indie Diarist podcast.